You're live. We are live this morning. It's Wednesday, April 22nd. This is the Senate Transportation Committee. And we are talking about the sections in H 944 that deal with condo units and charges, plug-in EVs. And is this Patty?
Yes, it is.
Patty, if you could give us your name and your background, a little bit about your background, and then you're on.
Okay, so my name is Patricia McCubbin. I live at the Village of North Shore in Burlington, and I am the president of the association. I've been on the board for about 12 years. I've lived here since 2011, and I've been the president of the board for 10 years. My background, some of what I bring to my job as a president is I have a degree in applied statistics, which is sort of weird, but I worked in public health for many years and in the protection of human subjects in biomedical and behavioral research. So I have a sense of protecting the community in what I've done for most of my life. So I bring that to the to my job at North Shore, and we have 136 units on 44 acres. We face the lake. We're at the far end of the New North End. The property is pretty unique. We have 25 residential buildings and about 30 garage buildings. And the buildings, the residential buildings have 4 to 6 side-by-side units. Each unit has a garden area in front of the kitchen area and a cement walkway to the parking lot and to other units in the building. This is sort of important about an individual charger. The parking lot has a curb, and then it's paved and goes out to the garage buildings, which can be some distance from the house. The inside space within a garage belongs to the individual unit, and the actual physical structure of each garage space is a common element. The garages are metered. The electricity in the garages are metered only 1 meter to every garage building or every 2 or 3 buildings. So it could be anywhere from 8 to 15 garage spaces that are metered for electricity. The electricity is old. The building was the development was started in the 80s. So the wiring that's connected building to building for the garages is underground. It's not in a conduit. It's very old and doesn't, there's not a lot of capacity in the garages. We basically allow the garage door openers and lighting, and a little bit of people can use their power tools once in a while. We had about 6 or 7 years ago, one of the new owners, he was a retired engineer in his 80s, and he's very, very bright and concerned about the environment. And he wanted to put an electric vehicle charger in his garage, not understanding common elements and all that stuff, because he'd never lived in a condo before. We investigated how that would be possible, but we were worried about the issue with the low capacity of the electrical in the garages. So I won't go into the real nitty gritty of everything, but we did investigate how we might be able to convert the garages to have that kind of electricity so that everybody could have it in their garages. But it would have been hundreds of thousands of dollars to take care of all this underground wiring, upgrade it and everything. We might need to put new transformers in that would hold all that extra power. That was not feasible within our budget. We do have an operating budget of about $1 million, and we have a pretty robust reserve budget. The federal government requires you put at least 10% of your dues into a reserve budget. We put 37% in. So we're in pretty good shape for that. And we budget, right now we're budgeting for a major re-siding project. So we have to budget over a long period of time because we can't overburden our residents. We still have a lot of people here that they're on Social Security and retirement. We don't have, we have a lot of younger people now that are working, but you can't just overburden the people whose incomes are lower. Some people have been here since the original buildings were built. They paid about $80,000, $88,000 for their units, and now they're worth like $500,000, but they don't have the money to be paying $700 or more for their dues. So anyway, after this gentleman brought this to our attention, we started looking for, or he started looking for grant opportunities because he's pretty bright. And he found a grant, and we were able to get one charging station put in to service the condominium association. At that time, was 6 or 7 years ago. We didn't have many electrical vehicles here, so we had an experiment. We did this, put in one charging station on a board that was posted between two units, and it had access to a transformer, which was important for us to be closer to transformer. We had to trench for putting the electrical into that charging station, and trench to get to a building to mount the meter for the electricity and the Wi-Fi connections. And we had to put in the Burlington Telecom wiring and the electrical wiring. So there was a lot of that kind of stuff. We were lucky to have the grant. It paid for quite a bit of it. It's a lot there's a lot of moving pieces when you do a project like this. So this actually was a good learning process for us. We were told that you can't put, and I'm not quite sure that this is 100% true, but that we can't put electrical vehicle charging units in our garages because of there's a lot of hazards and all that, fire hazards predominantly. So Burlington may have some restriction for us. So we actually wanted to go to the outdoor option. As far as an individual, which a lot of this bill is talking about, the individual installations outdoors, not in the garages, would be difficult for us. We would have to have, if somebody was going to run the electricity from their house, the easiest thing is to run a cord from their house out to the parking lot, which would involve having a trip hazard. As I said, I came from public health, and injury prevention is something that we dealt with a lot. And so if you have a cord out there, there's a lot of dangers for people, not just the homeowner might forget the cord is there, but other homeowners would be walking, along the sidewalk to go to visit other people or to go to the pool, whatever. And we have landscape services and snow blowing services or snowplow services. So those people would not be aware of the cord, especially the snow plowing or snow blowing people who would be here late at night in the dark, and they could easily run over a cord and cause an electrical problem. If we allowed somebody to put a post in front of their house, that would not have a long cord, then they would have to then run it underground, which affects going under the sidewalks, under the walkway, under the lawns, whatever, then going out and underneath the curb and coming up to where the parking would be. Parking is not assigned here, which is different from many other condominium associations, and we are not freestanding like other condominium associations. So the parking is basically for the building, but some buildings don't even have access. It was just the way that the builders designed this this association here. So there are 2 or 3 buildings that don't even have parking for their house. So the parking is a common element. It's not assigned to any one building, or one unit, so it's not a limited common element. Nobody has their own private parking space. By putting in a post of some sort that would allow them to charge would entail, besides all this digging and all that kind of stuff, it would involve some kind of legal manipulation of the declaration or other documents in order to change it to a limited common element. In the statute, you mentioned something about commercial use. So in this instance, commercial use, if you had a contractor coming in that has a, let's say an electric truck, they might say, hey, can I charge here? And homeowners are not going to think about, oh, I'm not supposed to do that. So they might allow that. They would have family or friends or whatever coming in, which would then again reduce the ability of the other owners using a common element. And that would reduce the number of parking spaces in that building. So those are those kind of issues. I don't know if you wanted any information. I could go over how we the second grant we got was we put in 9 additional chargers on 5 more sites. So we have 11 chargers at 6 sites throughout the condominium association that services 11 to 13 in the area of each service. But I don't know if you want to go into the details of how what we had to go through in order for that project to come to fruition, or if you just want maybe later to ask me. It's up to you what you'd like.
So is now a good time for questions, or?
I just had one other thing about
Okay,
the
why don't you
specific
finish and then
language.
we'll,
Okay.
why don't you finish and then we'll,
Okay, so in the language, there was one thing that I was concerned about because of how we work as a condominium association, and I know how other ones work or don't work. It's a 60-day limit, and this could be difficult. There's a law, the condominium law that's here says that we have to post our agenda 10 days before the meeting. So we have a complicated process here because we do have a lot of requests for architectural review. And so it goes to a committee, then the committee works on it. It could take a while working with the homeowner. And then at the end of working it out with the homeowner, then they will make a recommendation to the board. So in order for them to get to the board access for a recommendation, they've got to get it to us before the deadline for the agenda. If we miss the deadline, then it has to wait another month before we can get it on an agenda, unless it's some kind of an emergency, but this normally wouldn't be an emergency. We meet 10 times a year, not 12. So it's once a month except for July and December. We have an annual meeting in May, and we don't have a regularly scheduled board meeting in May. We have a small board meeting or a short board meeting right after the annual meeting to install the officers into their positions. So that's basically all that's done in May. So that reduces us to about 9 meetings a year on a regular basis. Smaller condominium associations that I've talked to, because many of them will call me for advice because they don't have a lawyer or a property manager, and a lot of people know who I am, unfortunately. And so they don't even meet sometimes more than once a year. So there's no way for these small condominium associations, even where you mentioned 12 units that the statute would apply to, 12 units, I mean, it's hard to get 5 people to be on a board in 12 units. They might be on a shoestring of trying to find, I have a hard time getting people to volunteer for the board or for committees. I can't imagine how 5 out of 12 people would want to have the job of being on the board. So that's something I think you should think about. And I was thinking that it would be more reasonable for most larger boards to have a 90-day or 120-day limit. For really smaller ones, maybe less than 20 units, you might have a longer time for them to be able to deal with it, just to be reasonable, and not to let somebody then just say, well, it wasn't approved, it wasn't discussed, so we just get to do it. That's sort of unfair to the entire community. So that's just my thinking on that. So if you want to ask me any other questions, I do talk fast. I'm sorry, I'm from New York, but
no, you're doing fine. The one question I did, you have 11 chargers now?
yes.
And is that enough? And is that working out okay?
It seems to be electric vehicle chargers aren't, or electric vehicle automobiles are not that prolific in here. We we might have 20 of them. I'm not quite sure. We don't have a way of tracking them, but the charging units are used often, but it's not 24/7. So we do have them, some of them, depending on where they're sited, there might not be a vehicle close to them, so they might not be used very often. But we have a couple that are used daily that I can see when I go by to go to the mailbox or whatever. So they are being used. We expect that it will be sufficient to handle capacity in or need in the community for probably at least 10 years or more. And I won't
Perfect.
be present. I might not even be alive.
Well, I suspect you'll be around for a while. At least we hope so.
My
So
goal is to live to 100.
there
you go.
there you go. We like that. So I think at this point we've got a second person to testify, Mary Ann.
Oh, Marianne, my property manager. Oh, there she is. Hi, Marianne.
Mary Ann, could you state your name, your title, and give us your perspective on the language we have in 944?
Good morning. I'm Marian Servideo. I own the Park Place Management Company. We manage several homeowners associations, condominiums in Chittenden County. And I've worked on the EV world for the last 10 years as I've seen it evolve. And I think I would echo Patty's sentiments about the length of time, and the automatic approval for the 60 days does not really fit. That's a real problem for us as a property manager administratively. When you're thinking about these associations, and some of our smaller ones don't even have to be 20 units or less, but some of our smaller associations, for practicality purposes, we meet quarterly, just because there's not the volume of work necessary to require meeting more frequently. And because they're all volunteers, and a lot of times they're working individuals, that conflicts with us as property managers, because a lot of times they want to meet in the evening. So that's what drives that quarterly timing. So I would really agree with her that it needs to be at a minimum of 90 days. And I would hope longer. The other thing I would ask you to think about is we have a lot of properties that are wood frame buildings with underground parking. And those buildings have a number of conflicts with being able to provide EV service. First of all, they don't have the electrical capacity coming into the building, because a lot of these properties were built when they were designed and built and engineered. The electrical capacity was set for what they had as components. And EVs require much larger charging, electrical capacity. So you have to bring in new lines. And that was one of the things that North Shore had to deal with. And it's very cost prohibitive. If you're looking at a smaller association, that can be burdensome. And I don't really see how a single person could handle that financially. So from my perspective as a property manager of a lot of these smaller places, it would seem to me that leaving that decision to that group of owners would be a better solution because financially, we have people from different socioeconomic groups. So maybe there's a smaller association, but they have owners that have, for lack of a better word, deeper pockets, and they can afford to bring in these kinds of things versus those that don't have that. Please understand, I am a proponent of EV charging. I own 2 electric vehicles myself, and I have charging ability in my own home. I'm just thinking about this for multi-unit properties and some of the things that I've had to deal with helping homeowners and associations go through these hurdles. The other thing that is a real financial concern and problem is a lot of these do not have the fire fighting capability or sprinkler systems to handle for the intensity of electric vehicle fires. And structurally, we have associations that have independent parking garages, and they, even if they can bring in, because I have a building downtown, they can bring in and restructure the way the electricity comes in so that they could provide this to the homeowners. But structurally, that parking garage has a limit, and because EV vehicles are heavier, it does affect the structure. So saying to a homeowner, you can have the ability to do this irregardless of your rules, if you don't get approval within 60 days, that's a real concern for us when it comes to these structural limitations. So those are just some of the things off the top of my head that I think need some real forethought and consideration. That's all I've got.
Thank you. That was helpful. Questions?
Well, I'll just say, I think the language does address those concerns, because it does say that the association can have reasonable restrictions. They can require all these things. It's only where it would be a restriction on the association is if it's within the boundaries of the the owner's unit limited common element. So for those associations where there's a limited common is included, like different than when there's a parking garage or a space that's away, but we have some condo associations where there's a limited common area that the owner is limited common element, so that's where we're saying the association couldn't put unwarranted or unreasonable restrictions. You can do a restriction, you require the permit, and I hear the 60 days, but I think the language in here does address your other concerns about the other examples that were given. If it's in the common element, but we had an example of a condo owner that has wanted to even put a level 1, which is just an outlet,
Yep.
and run a cord just to charge at night while they're there. And the condo association said no, because that was considered maintaining a vehicle, and their bylaws did not allow owners to maintain their vehicle even in their limited common space. So that's the kind of example that I'm trying to avoid, where the condo association is putting unreasonable restrictions on the charging.
And I can appreciate that. The one thing I would say is that I do have some homeowners, for instance, out at Finney Crossing condos, they are about 8 units. The garages are underneath, and then they have, the way it was designed, there are multiple units that are above a garage that are not, it's not like a stacked unit. That garage is considered a limited common element. They only have 100 amps, so they could do slow charging there, but I do have.
This doesn't say you have to require, that would be a reasonable requirement to say you have to put it in a way that is the code and that would be reasonable for the electrical service that is there. So there's nothing in here that says, oh, you have to pay for a line upgrade or transformer upgrade. It's just if the if it can be done reasonably, you can't restrict it. If it's in a limited common element. And they're gonna pick.
And okay, I hear that. And the only other thing I would say to that is we got a lot of feedback from some of the residents that were in that building that they are afraid of and don't want the EV charging. So that's the only reason why I'm saying maybe
Right.
consideration should be given to allowing the government of the condo or that association to make those decisions. I leave that to you because there's more than one thing that bears on this. So I hear what you're saying.
You might have owners that don't like electromagnetic forces coming from the power lines or for the meter or from the transformer. I think there's some unreasonable fears out there. I think there's nothing different from a charger. If they might be afraid of the EV, that's where the batteries are. There's nothing in the EV charger that would provide the reason for a fire if it's installed to code. So I think some of this is kind of what my interest in the language is to get around some unreasonable fears of EV charging and people that are even putting restrictions in because they saw something on social media that said EVs cause fire, so they don't want chargers, so they put it in their condo docs. That's what I'm trying to avoid. If it's being done to the electric code and the fire marshal says it's okay, then the association shouldn't be able to stop. That's my intent of it. But I hear you. I am familiar with condo associations and the discussions that go on endlessly, it seems at times, about these kind of issues. So I hear you when you're the one working with the owners and trying to address everybody's concerns and needs.
So at this point, we're almost at the end of our half an hour, and we thank you both very much. It's been informative. If we have further questions, we'll be back. And we very much appreciate you helping us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for inviting us. Thank you.
Thank you. And this point, we're going to shift. I will say we might want to talk about the time period.
Yeah.
And we could, yeah, I think that was,
The 90 day, yeah.
yeah,
That's.
yeah, I think, and
So I'm still on here. Can you get me off if you don't want me
No.
anymore?
You're stuck here for the whole day.
You're a good member now, Patricia. We've got
Okay.
Wendy. Okay. Or, she's in me. Okay. You could sit where Wendy is.
can you take her off, Megan? Yeah. So we'll take that up afterwards. That will probably be something we want to consider in a committee amendment. I think, are you first, Jeff? Why did you move into the chair?
I thought it was coming to be a blooming onion for me.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, not anymore. Too early for that.
Do you know how many calories are in that thing?
Yeah,
you can tell.
No,
I used to help manage the Champlain Valley Fair, so I got my fair share of blooming onions.
Oh, no, give me a church leg and I'm.
Anytime we're ready, Jeff.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for the committee, Chairman Westman and members of the Senate Transportation Committee. Good morning. My name is Jeff Bartley. I'm the Director of Innovation and Marketing for the Patrick Leahy Burlington International Airport, which we affectionately call Leahy BTB because it is much shorter. With me today, I have my marketing assistant, Alex Cohen, and then our FBO, Heritage Aviation, Matt Collins, he's their CEO. He is here. And then on the line, I believe a representative from Breeze Airways is as well. What I thought I'd do is kind of provide a top line summary of the airport's perspective, and then I'll default to the airlines and the testimony after me from the airlines perspective, or if you have questions for Matt Collins as well. What I want to start by saying something sincere. We are very grateful for the legislator in this committee and for the relationships that we have built with the administration, the Agency of Transportation, and Michelle, and members of the legislative body. That collaborative spirit matters to us, and is part of what has made the Vermont's aviation industry successful. And it is in that spirit that I am here today. We are not just here as partners and joint stewards of travel, transportation, and tourism in Vermont. We are here because we care deeply about getting this right, and we believe Vermont's aviation future is a shared interest. In summary, we want to be a part of the solution. What we are asking for today is simply that this committee or the Senate Finance Committee remove the 2% jet fuel surcharge from H944 because we believe this particular mechanism, added without industry input, carries meaningful risks to our airport's success, growth, and momentum. I want to also begin my notes with some good news because I think it's important for the context for everything else that I'm going to bring up. Leahy BTV is not just an airport, it's an economic engine for the entire state. Our most recent economic impact assessment tells a remarkable story of growth. Since 2018, we have seen a 14.4% increase in total jobs supported by the airport, bringing that total to 5,645 Vermonters whose livelihoods are tied to the aviation at our airport in some capacity. Total payroll has grown by 91% to $325.4 million in annual income. The combined airport regional value, including economic output and existing replacement value, now stands at $1.9 billion, an 80% increase over 8 years. We generate over $1 billion in economic output annually, and the state and local taxes generated by the airport have grown 81% from $34.5 million in 2018 to $62.5 million today. That growth is not accidental. It is the result of strategic investment, partnerships, entrepreneurial drive, and a commitment to meeting the evolving demands of Vermont's economy and tourism sector. That is the foundation we are building on, and it is the foundation that is generally at risk when we make Vermont a significantly more expensive fuel market as it relates to aviation. In late March, we opened our new terminal, a transformational upgrade that has been years in the making, funded in large part by a $34 million congressional allocation. The new terminal includes 4 new jet bridges that can accommodate larger aircraft, significantly expand passenger waiting areas, and providing modern amenities. And we're very proud of this, was built with sustainability in mind. Mass timber, geothermal is used to heat and cool the building, and future solar arrays are going to be a part of this project. NPR covered the opening just 3 weeks ago, noting that Leahy BTV, and we were very proud about this article. They were in Omaha and Alaska, we're running this story, so we got national coverage. Is actively positioning itself to attract a greater share of our regional market, our catchment area, which stretches from northern New York to New Hampshire. Currently, only about half of those travelers choose Burlington, meaning 1.5 million flyers are still choosing other airports. Our goal is to change that. We want our local market and our local dollars to stay local. We are actively engaged in conversations with approximately a dozen airlines about expanding service, and this summer we will reach the second highest level of commercial service at Leahy BTV. And we now have more direct flights than any other point in the airport's history, 19 destinations, including Atlanta, Charleston, Charlotte, Chicago, Detroit, Denver, Fort Myers, Minneapolis, Newark, JFK, LaGuardia, Orlando, Philadelphia, Raleigh, Durham, Tampa, Washington, D.C., Washington, Dulles, and starting May 23rd, new nonstop service to Houston. And there is more to come. I'll add the national context for small airports like ours has rarely been more favorable. Large hub airports face growing congestions, a shortage of air traffic controllers, and projections of continued passenger growth, all of which create an opening for a well-positioned, smaller airport like ours to attract more services. Aviation analysts have noted that airlines build networks to serve the most profitable routes, of course, which means enticing airlines to spread their routes to more small hub airports is not an easy sell. It requires Vermont and Leahy BTV to be competitive on every metric that airlines evaluate. Cost, especially related to commodities, is one of the most important metrics. The FAA projects activity at large hub airports will grow about twice as fast as at small hub airports over the next 2 decades, even as those hubs face congestions and air traffic control shortages. That creates an opening for airports like ours. We're not just about the Vermont story, we're about a national conversation about how smaller airports can take pressure off of places like Boston and carry more of the load. The demand is there, and it is certainly not going away. The aviation industry is dynamic and highly competitive. As we manage the second busiest airport in New England in terms of operations, we are also working to meet the needs of region's businesses, tourism economy, and general aviation community. As amended, the bill would add a permanent 2% surcharge on jet fuel on top of Vermont's existing 6% sales tax, South Burlington's 1% local option tax. At Leahy BTV, that total, with that surcharge, the rate would be 9%, which would make it the third highest in the nation. This is in addition to the region already having the highest average price in the country on Jet A, 100LL, and SAF, which is sustainable aviation fuel. And we're very proud that we're one of the first airports in New England, or this side of the country, to have sustainable aviation fuel. For more context, Maine taxes jet fuel at 4 cents a gallon. New Hampshire and New York are each around half a penny. Some states don't tax it at all. We will be less competitive with such high fuel costs. That gap matters because aviation fuel demand is genuinely price sensitive. Airlines and operators compare fuel costs across the markets. When prices diverge, they adjust, sometimes by doing something called tankering, carrying extra fuel specifically to avoid buying expensive locations. A higher rate applied to a shrinking volume base also doesn't necessarily produce more revenue, it can produce less. Last year, just over $2 million was collected in jet fuel taxes, down from 2.7 in 2022, telling the story about global fuel prices normalizing after an unusually high period, not about declining activity here. As I stated, employments and the size of aircraft have never been more stable. They are growing at Leahy BTV. Case in point, last October 2025, we had over 160 passengers total come and go via our airport. We've never hit that mark before in any month in the history of the airport. It was a 6% year-over-year growth for October, and we're projecting this year the second busiest year at Leahy BTV in our history. There's also something worth understanding about how this tax actually flows. The legal taxpayer isn't the airline, it's the fuel distributor upstream in the supply chain. By the time fuel reaches the airport, the tax is already embedded in the price. Airlines pay it, but indirectly. Any changes here touches a more complex system than it might appear, and the Heritage Aviation speak to that if you have more questions. Operationally, in most cases, the FBO is not selling the fuel itself. They are providing into-plane services. The airline typically owns the fuel through its own supplier contract, and then Heritage Aviation charges a service fee for handling, storage, and delivery. The tax and the FBO service component are entirely separate. We now know Vermont receives between 2 and 3 million annually in aviation fuel revenue. Most of it is generated at Leahy BTV. Our annual state appropriation is capped at $500,000. These funds are vital, and we are deeply grateful for the state's investment. However, as we requested in February in House Transportation, we do respectfully request that the committee ensure this allocation is not restricted solely to capital matching grants as part of the Airport Improvement Project program, or AIP, but instead adjust the statute to be aligned with federal statutes, specifically 49 U.S. Code 47133, allowing the funds to be used for either capital or operating costs of the airport. This additional burden placed on us by the state, as we understand it, occurred as part of the 2018 transportation bill. As far as we can tell, no other appropriation from aviation jet fuel revenues in Vermont are as restrictive as they are at our airports. As I've outlined, this simple 2% surcharge that is believed to be able to generate $600,000 a year is not simple. It is not guaranteed to generate more revenue. It might even cause less. Additionally, it risks the momentum and growth we are seeing at Leahy BTV because this proposed surcharge is substantially targeted at Leahy BTV users, passengers, airlines, and general aviation. We find it unfair to continue to tax our users to offset costs in the transportation bill. However, we do understand the spirit of that. We respectfully ask that you remove the aviation fuel surcharge language. I understand that the committee is moving towards an amendment on the floor. We do feel it is better to resolve these things in committee than on the floor. In the interest of transparency, I am testifying tomorrow in Senate Finance with the same request that they passed before they passed the transportation bill out of their committee. Finally, and more broadly, we want to be in these conversations earlier. If there are ideas about how to fund transportation's future, call us, we'll show up. Our goal is simple: to ensure that Vermont's primary aviation gateway has the flexibility and support necessary to continue driving economic growth, supporting thousands of jobs, and connecting our state to the world. Vermont aviation is in a great place right now, and we'd love to keep it that way together. And thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Questions? Yeah.
Is it correct that you don't know how much jet fuel was sold at BTP?
We've asked that question. It's really hard because there's so few pairs, as we've been told by the tax department.
They won't tell you.
I've gotten the aggregate, Representative Walker shared it with me. There was just over 2 million last year. And that's going to fluctuate based off of the cost of the fuel. So if the gallon per cost is higher, you're going to collect more taxes like you did in 2022.
If you can't find out from your FBO, just having the number of gallons, because tax will tell you that.
I would love to default to Matt Collins on that one because he can answer that probably more succinctly than I can.
Yes, we do report to the state.
Matt,
So I
if you
can't-
give your name.
Yes, Matthew Collins.
Can you just tell the airport how many gallons? Or you won't do it?
Sure. So right, last year, so there's two types of fuel. There's contract jet, which is sold through a distributor. There's retail that we own and we sell. So that breakout for Jet A was 1,452,300. The contract breakout was 1,370,661. That doesn't include airline. We do track how many gallons we pump for the airlines. We don't charge off of that though. We charge off of a service fee. Just every airline pays the same amount.
But would the distributor be paying off those gallons, the total?
The distributor is the one that is the legal tax.
So that gallon number that you just.
So Heritage,
Is all of it, or is it just the part that you control?
so Heritage on the retail fuel, because we own that fuel and we're a reseller for that fuel, we will pay and give monthly remittance to the state on those sales taxes. The contract is owned by a separate distributor.
Right.
So we get a service fee for doing that, but they will collect the data for the end users where it was, and then they will submit taxes to the state.
I'm just wondering if there's more gallons outside of your universe, so that number, I already forgot what it was, million gallons, what was it? How many?
1.3.
Yeah.
Could there be other gallons taxed or sold that's not part of that 1.3 at
Sure,
Sure.
it's in it's the
Not the ad gas, so yeah, no, I meant of just the jet fuel.
No. So the airlines, same way contract people, they purchase from the distributor, and that's where they said, okay, we're delivering this to BTB. Okay, that's the end use station. That's correct. They will submit taxes to the state.
So could you just take that number and multiply it by the tax, and then you would know how much tax you're paying? Like, I don't understand why.
We
I heard this
don't pay any tax.
Well, the tax that is paid, I guess.
Right.
Wasn't that your interest when House committee? I wasn't there, obviously, but that I heard you were saying you don't know how much tax is paid by that.
Yeah, so the challenge was, the tax department had a hard time making that number
I know,
public
but
because
can't you
there's
just
so.
multiply the tax by this?
No, it's not, it doesn't quite work that way because you might be paying a lower rate in a different state and then trucking it here. There's so few, there's so many complexities to it. It's not just a simple gallon into the tax. But we did get the total number, and we believe that's probably pretty accurate, around that $2 million.
So you think there's some gas being sold there that's being taxed because the distributor's paying the tax in New York or something?
No, they are paying the front tax.
Right.
So there's
Tax you think is where it's being paid, where it wouldn't be captured by the gallon, but
So the tax department just looking at an aggregate. So there's other airports, obviously, in Vermont, right?
Right.
So what they're saying is we just get the totals.
I get that.
Right. So you could kind of do some backward math to figure that out.
So I think that's what the airport, well, at least what I would care if I was the airport, like you're getting $500,000 from the state, but not the airport, but the airlines that are there and the distributors that are supplying the airport is paying more than that.
We're trying to figure that out. That was one of our asks, and we did not ask for an increase in the cap this year. We will in future years, and we felt in transparency, knowing where that number was, because we want to be fair to the state aviation as a whole in our state airports.
Right.
We do feel that cap should certainly be higher. And we have very large projects coming down the pipe where we're going to need those funds. But that was why we asked that. What we're really interested in is removing the restriction that we have to use this allocation to match AIP funds. And the reason for that is we're allowed to bank AIP, and there may be years where we may not draw it down. So as it's written and our interpretation of it is if we bank it for 3 years, because we have a very large project coming down the pike, you can't allocate it to us because we're not matching. So that's why we want to follow federal law, which says it can be used for capital or operating costs. But right now you're saying you can only use it for AIP matching.
Okay, yeah, we haven't. looked
No, we
at that
haven't.
recently. And was it, did it used to be over 500,000?
Yes.
Was a million?
Previously, I believe it was attached to our capital plan, so which was a 6% match. Where right now, if we did that, it's probably around 1.5, 1.8% of our capital plan.
Do you know if you've ever gotten money from the capital bill? For capital?
I don't know off the top of my head, no. I don't think so, but I don't know off the top of my head.
Be something to think about.
Weird. Go ahead.
One other point of clarification. So just for the tax, the airline's buying in bulk. And we typically get 10,000 gallon deliveries. All that fuel has been taxed. It might be inventory sitting in our fuel farm and not have been pumped. So there could be additional monies that aren't reflective of gallons. There's going to be a little bit of
Let's go
disparity.
lay over the
Yes.
time calendar year versus 1
Yes.
You could probably get pretty close.
Yeah, you're going to get close, but it's not going to be an exact. Yeah.
We're gonna, you can stay right there,
Oh,
but, John, you're on the screen. Could,
Yes, good morning.
you're on. We need
Okay.
your name, who you represent and we might break in for questions, but
Of course. Thank you. Chair Westman and members of the committee, good morning. I am John Almaris, Managing Director for Taxes at Airlines for America, the principal trade association of the leading U.S. passenger and cargo airlines. Our members include American, Delta, and United, which serve Patrick Leahy Burlington International Airport, or BTV. My A4A colleague, Joshua Saltzman, sent a letter to you on Friday regarding H944, and I appreciate the opportunity to follow up with the committee and speak to you today about this important issue for commercial aviation. This bill includes a large and harmful new tax on jet fuel. A4A strongly opposes the tax increase, and I urge you to amend the bill to remove this provision. The current version of the bill would impose a permanent 2% surcharge on the sale of jet fuel in Vermont, in addition to the current sales tax on jet fuel, which is already one of the highest in the nation. At BTV, this surcharge would subject jet fuel to a total tax rate of 9%. The 2% surcharge, plus the state's 6% sales tax, and South Burlington's 1% local option sales tax. If enacted, this bill would result in Vermont having the third highest rate of tax on jet fuel in the country, while many of your neighbors like Maine, New Hampshire, and even New York have low taxes on aviation fuel. The increase would be detrimental to the state and its businesses and its citizens. According to the most recent FAA statistics, commercial aviation supports more than 8,800 jobs and drives $1.1 billion in total economic activity in Vermont. Airline schedules show that commercial service in Vermont will reach an 11-year high for the summer of 2026. However, as I am sure you have seen in the news, the recent sharp spike in fuel prices is putting pressure on fares and service. Increasing the tax on fuel by almost a third will raise the cost for airlines to operate in Vermont and worsen economic pressure on consumers from high fuel prices. Commercial aviation runs on small margins, and fuel is one of an airline's largest costs, typically second behind labor costs. Any increase in cost can affect price and influence decisions about service and expansion. Air service reductions typically lead to reduced travel and trade and ultimately fewer jobs, thereby damaging the economy. Beyond this possible economic harm, A4A also questions the need for a tax increase. H944 would direct the revenue from the surcharge to the state's transportation fund to be used for aviation-related infrastructure. While this comports with federal law, it is not clear that the revenue will be used for the benefit of those who are ultimately responsible for paying the tax, including passengers and shippers. Leahy BTV has told us that the state receives between $2 million and $4 million annually in aviation fuel taxes, depending on the price of fuel, and the majority of this amount is generated by commercial fuel at Leahy BTV. Yet the airport receives only $500,000 a year from the state. In other words, commercial aviation is paying the lion's share of taxes, but it is not receiving a commensurate benefit, effectively funding airports that airlines and their customers cannot use. A4A firmly believes that revenues from taxes on aviation fuel should flow back to the airport of origin and be used for airport operating and capital expenses. Airlines and their customers already pay billions of dollars annually in federal aviation taxes to fund the Airport Improvement Program, which is largely used to provide federal grants to airports with little or no commercial service. A4A agrees with Leahy BTV that Vermont should examine its current funding system first and not further exacerbate this problem by imposing an unnecessary and economically harmful surcharge that will likely not benefit Leahy BTV or those who use the airport. Again, thank you for letting me speak to you about this important issue today, and I welcome any questions you have.
Thank you very much. That was quite clear. Maureen from Breeze? Or
Maren.
Maren.
I don't know if she wanted to speak. She was on in case there are other questions.
I have a note from Megan that said you'd like to speak.
Yes, if it pleases the committee, I have a couple remarks I could make.
Yep.
Chair Westman and members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to make these remarks. My name is Maren Klein and I represent Breeze Airways today. Breeze respectfully opposes this bill as it has been amended specifically with respect to the 2% jet fuel tax added after the bill passed the House. I sent a letter yesterday to the chair explaining more of these points in detail. But to introduce ourselves a little bit, Breeze is a young airline. We launched in May of 2021, and our entire business model is built around connecting small and mid-sized communities. And Vermont is exactly that kind of market. We entered Burlington in February of 2024, and in just over 2 years, we've grown to 5 routes and up to 10 weekly departures, which is a 76% increase in flights since our inaugural year. We fly Vermonters nonstop to Orlando, Fort Myers, and Raleigh-Durham year-round, and to Tampa and Charleston seasonally. This tax would impact all of the airlines flying out of BTV and would be especially detrimental for Breeze for a couple of reasons. First, on average, we fly the longest routes out of BTV. Longer routes burn more fuel, so per gallon surcharge falls disproportionately on us compared to these carriers, other carriers running short, high-frequency shuttles. Second, we fly aircraft, larger aircraft on average. Our Airbus A220 seats 137 passengers, which is larger on average than the other aircraft flown at BTV. These planes, bigger planes, mean more fuel and again, more tax. But I'd ask the committee to weigh this carefully. As Breeze grows and adds flights, Vermont already collects more fuel tax revenue automatically. Fuel prices have risen, our operation has expanded, and the state's existing tax base has grown right alongside us. Adding a 2% surcharge on top of that is respectfully almost like double dipping on revenue that the state is already receiving. Essentially, the practical effect of this bill would be to penalize the exact kind of growth this committee should want to encourage, which would be new nonstop service, new competition, and new access for Vermont travelers to destinations they previously had to connect to reach. Because of these reasons, we respectfully urge the committee to amend this version of the bill to remove this fuel tax increase. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We appreciate you all coming here today, and we will definitely be talking about this.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
You can sit.
Thank you.
He doesn't want you to go.
He's got some tickets he needs to buy.
Okay. I can help you with
No,
He's gonna fly.
so if we could take us offline for a minute, because we're gonna